So here we have that the gradient of a line is the measure of the steepness of that line. The gradient of a horizontal line is 0, whereas the gradient of a vertical line is undefined. The symbol used in mathematics for gradient is m. So here I have a horizontal line and the gradient is equal to 0. And here I have a vertical line and the gradient is undefined. Here we have a line sloping upwards and that line would have a positive gradient. And across here we have a line sloping downwards and that line would have a negative gradient. Now the gradient can be defined as the change in the vertical distance divided by the change in the horizontal distance. So that will be the change in the distance on the y-axis, which is vertical, divided by the change in the distance on the x-axis, which is horizontal. Now we can write m for gradient is equal to the change in y divided by the change in x. So this here will be symbol for a change in y, and this will be symbol for a change in x. So what we can write is that gradient is equal to y2 take away y1 divided by x2 take away x1. So this here would be your formula for finding gradient. So here I have my Cartesian plane and I have a straight line. I'm going to find the gradient of this line. This line is sloping upwards, so I expect that my gradient will be positive. So the first thing you'll do is select a distance on the line that will be more than half the line. So I've selected the distance between these 2 points here, and as you can see, it's more than half the line. So this distance here would be my change in y. And this distance here would be my change in x. So we'll have gradient is equal to change in y over change in x. Now if I look at this distance here, I'm going from 1 all the way up to 7. So a change in vertical distance will be 7 take away 1, which is 6. So my change in y is equal to 6. You can also count the blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that gives the change in y as 6. Now if you look at the change in x, we can count the blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that means the change in x is 9. So I'll have gradient is equal to change in y, which is 6, over the change in x, which is 9, which can be broken down to 2/3. So the gradient of this line is 2/3. Now let's look at finding the gradient using the formula. What I can do is write out the coordinates of these 2 points that I've selected. So the coordinate of this point here is 3 on the x and 7 on the y. So that point will be 3 and 7. This point down here is -6 on the x and 1 on the y. So the coordinate of this point will be -6 and +1. So what we can do, we can name this here x1, y1, and this down here x2, y2. So x1 will be 3 and y1 will be 7, x2 would be -6 and y2 would be +1. So we can write the formula for gradient like this. Gradient is equal to y2 take away y1 divided by x2 take away x1. So we'll have m is equal to y2, which is +1. So we have 1 take away y1, which is 7, divided by x2, which is -6. So we have -6 take away x1, which is +3. So we have +3. Now 1 take away 7 will give you -6, and -6 take away 3 will give you -9. So this will be equal to -6 divided by -9. And here we are dividing two negative numbers, so our answer will be positive, and this will break down to +2/3. So here we have the gradient using the formula y2 take away y1 divided by x2 take away x1. And here we looked at the graph, we looked at the change in the vertical distance divided by the change in the horizontal distance. So here I have my Cartesian plane and I have my line sloping downwards. So this line would have a negative gradient. So again, we select a distance that's more than half the line. So I've selected my 2 points on the line, and this distance here is more than half the line. Here I'll have my change in y, and here I'll have my change in x. So again, we can count the distance for the change in y, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So my change in y is equal to 6. And I can count my distance for my change in x. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So my change in x would be 9. Now because we know the line is sloping downwards, we know that the gradient is negative. So here I'll have my gradient is equal to my change in y divided by my change in x. And I'll insert this negative sign because I know that this line is sloping downwards, therefore the gradient will be negative. So I'll have gradient is equal to negative change in y, which is 6, divided by my change in x, which is 9. So that will break down to be negative 2/3. So my gradient will be negative 2/3. Now let's look at the gradient using the formula m is equal to y2 take away y1 divided by x2 take away x1. So I'll write out the coordinates for these 2 points. So the coordinate for this point would be negative 3 on the x and positive 7 on the y. So I have negative 3 and positive 7. And the coordinate for this point would be positive 6 on the x and positive 1 on the y. So I'll have positive 6 and positive 1. I'll label this x1 and y1. I'll label here x2 and y2. So x1 is negative 3 and y1 is 7. x2 is positive 6 and y2 is positive 1. So when I'm writing my formula now, I have y2 take away y1. So that'll be positive 1 take away positive 7. So I'll have 1 take away 7 divided by, and then I'll have x2 take away x1. So that'll be positive 6 take away negative 3. So I'll have positive 6 take away negative 3. Now I'll multiply these two negative signs and get a positive sign. And 1 take away 7 is negative 6. So I have my gradient is equal to negative 6 divided by 6 plus 3. And 6 plus 3 is 9. So I'll have m is equal to negative 6 divided by 9. And this will break down to negative 2/3. So I have my gradient is equal to negative 2/3. So in this question, we have to find the gradient of the curve at the point x is equal to 4. Now what we do, we find gradient of straight lines. This is a curve, therefore it doesn't have a fixed gradient. What we'll have to do at the point x equals 4 is draw a tangent to this curve. And we'll find the gradient of the tangent to the curve. And that will be the gradient of the curve at x equals 4. So first we'll identify the point where x is equal to 4. So this is 4 on the x-axis. If we draw a line straight upwards, it will touch the curve at this point. So we'll be drawing a tangent to the curve at this point. So here I've drawn my tangent to the curve, and now I'll select a distance that's more than half of this line. So I've selected my 2 points. So this distance here would be more than half the line. So this distance here would be my change in y, and this distance here would be my change in x. Now these points that I've selected doesn't fall on a whole number, so I'll have to know the unit for each of the smallest block. So I have 4 blocks for every 1 unit. So I have the smallest block represents 1 over 4 units. That's because every 1 unit we have 4 of the smallest blocks. So this 1 comes from every 1 unit, and this 4 is the number of little blocks in between that 1 unit. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 little blocks for every 1 unit. And that's how I have 1 over 4. And if you go on a calculator and say 1 divided by 4, you'll get 0.25. So 1 over 4 is equal to 0.25. So now we can count using the smallest blocks. So if I'm writing the coordinate for this point here, the x value will be here. So we have 5, we have 5.25, and then we have 5.5. So the x value is 5.5. And the y value goes straight across here. So we have 6, and we have 6.25. And for down here, our x value is right here. So we have 2.25, 2.5, and 2.75. So 2.75 is our x value for this point here. And our y value will go all the way across to here. So we have -1, -1.25, -1.5, and -1.75. So our y value will be -1.75. So I have my x2, y2, and I have my x1 and y1. So my gradient will be equal to y2, take away y1, divided by x2, take away x1. So gradient is equal to y2 is 6.25, take away y1, which is -1.75. So I'll have 6.25 take away -1.75. So I write that 6.25 take away -1.75 divided by x2 take away x1. So that'll be 5.5 take away +2.75. So I'll have 5.5 take away 2.75. So these two negative signs here, you multiply them, you get a positive sign. So I'll have 6.25 plus 1.75 divided by, so 5.5 take away 2.75 is equal to 2.75. And 6.25 plus 1.75 is equal to 8. So my gradient will be 8 divided by 2.75. So my gradient will be equal to +2.9. Now this will be the gradient of the tangent to the curve at the point x equal 4, which will be the gradient of the curve at x equal 4.